Are you ready to grow your financial practice to heights you've never imagined? You're listening to the Elevated Advisor Podcast with your online business mentor and host, David Scranton. Each week, you'll learn Dave's secrets that have helped him become one of the most successful financial advisors in the country. So are you ready to become an elevated advisor? The Elevated Advisor Podcast starts now.
And welcome to the Elevated Advisor Podcast. I'm David Scranton. I have a question for you. Have you ever wondered how much business might go out the door when your elderly clients pass away? Well, if you have, today's guest says that you shouldn't lose any business. In fact, it should be an opportunity to gain business. Of course, I'm talking to today's special guest, Ryan Nuaman. Ryan Nuaman is a market strategist, and he also has his own podcast called Adjusted for Risk. Ryan, thanks for being here. Good to have you on the other side of the fence. I know I was on your podcast, and now you're on mine, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, David, thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be on your podcast. Thank you. And it's different to be on the other side of the microphone. I'm in the hot seat now, so I often tell my guests that I'm better at answering or asking questions than answering. So you have to tell me how I do after this.
Well, luckily for you, you threw me softballs when I was on your podcast, so that means I ought to be nice to you in the other direction. But so do you find that a lot of advisors think that, oh my goodness, I have to make up for losses because some of the statistics, the statistics that say that, gosh, certain percentage of advisors' business will disappear when their clients die, that won't stay with them. Do you think most people believe that? If so, why? And talk about why you think that's not the case.
Yeah, it's a great question. And a lot of people, when they think of the Great Wealth Transfer, it kind of sounds the alarms. It's like, oh my goodness, I've got to try and connect now from going from the baby boomers to now millennials and this younger generation. How do I do it? And they think of it as a risk to their practice. Mm-hmm. But I think of it as another way. If you do it right, it's a big if, you can capitalize on it. Cerulli predicts that $105 trillion are going to change hands over the next 20 years or so. And this is maybe that alarming point, David, that you just brought up, that 70% of the heirs to all this money is going to leave their parents' financial advisor after inheriting the assets. Mm-hmm. That right there is pretty alarming. But like you said, I think, when as a financial advisor, you think, well, now I've got to change the way I do business to connect with this younger generation. Text messaging, social media, no longer are they going to want in-person meetings. Maybe it's all on Zoom like us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it brings a worry to them. But I think of it should be thought of as an opportunity for advisors. And if you just take the correct approach to it, mm-hmm. and understand the demands of these younger clients, and then look at how to address those demands.
Yeah, I agree. One of our advisors, when he creates his business plan every year, he has a different source of lead generation in his business plan, and then one source is called a death event. And I don't like the term. The death event is he knows he's going to lose so many clients. And if he can keep the money and take over some of their children's money, then it's actually an opportunity, which is exactly what you're describing. And I think it's different because, it's interesting. In the late 90s, when I first started working with retirees, I was working with what was called the greatest generation back then. And a lot of people that were maybe late 60s or in their 70s, getting them as clients then. And it was interesting because a lot of stuff was on a handshake. They didn't have advisors. They had bigger pensions, and if they liked you, they'd become a client. The generation today is a little different, and a lot of times by the time you market to people in their late 60s or 70s, they already have a relationship with the advisor. Now, sometimes the advisor's not doing a great job. Sometimes you can win them over, but what we found is the sweet spot right now is more late 50s, early 60s. So I think one way is to get the late 50s, early 60s as your clients, because they're the ones who are set to inherit money just a few years later. But you're not talking about that. You're talking about for your clients that have aged, right? When they have gotten older, how you can have relationships with those children who are probably the ideal age of a new client for you anyway. So talk to us about strategies. What kinds of strategies have you found work to keep in touch with some of the children of your existing clients so that you have a good chance of not only keeping the assets, but garnering more?
Yeah, it's a great question and kind of the million dollar question, right? And at Zephyr, we talk to a lot of financial advisors, a lot of people in this industry, and trying to get an understanding of what they're hearing to so we can offer support and technology to help them. And it really comes back, number one is communication. You know,
Okay.
get these younger clients, the heirs, the children, and maybe they are 40 years old. Uh, Start communicating with them, invite them to the meetings, start understanding their demands, understanding their objectives, and get them kind of part of that process, that planning process. So when your client does pass on, it's not a new relationship. You've already built that relationship. You've taken them golfing, you've taken them out to eat. Start that communication now because it will help process, because one thing we've learned in all this communication is that personalization is going to be the key moving forward. You know, David, I started in 2020 dating myself here over 25 years ago, and we always thought personalization was writing a birthday card, a handwritten note,
Yeah,
right?
of
That's
course.
not enough. No, personalization needs to be personalized reports, um, personalized communication. How do you want to communicate? Is it via text? Is it via a phone call or a Zoom? How do these younger clients want to communicate? Do they want data and information on demand? You got to provide that to them. How do they want a 30-page performance report, or do they want a 3-page performance report?
Mhm.
That all goes along with it. And the sooner you can find out their demands, it will lead to more opportunities. And then they'll start spreading the word and giving you referrals to other younger generations.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done is, a lot of our advisors have done, is just say, start estate planning as part of their practice. Now, you can't do that so much if you're with a big firm because they don't let you talk about taxes or any of that. But as an independent advisor, there's plenty of services out there today where there's, online where there are attorneys backing it up, where you can actually help clients do an estate plan. You can actually monetize it, and with the right licensing, actually charge a fee for that, or have a relationship with a local lawyer. But by controlling the estate plan, it gives you a really good excuse to then talk to the children, to maybe orchestrate a family meeting as to, gosh, what might happen if mom and dad aren't there anymore. So great opportunity to get that introduction. And sometimes, even if you don't want to work with younger people, you want to work with people 55 and over, let's say, because you want to fish, you have to fish where the fish are. Well, that's great, but sometimes you have to work with somebody a little bit younger just to get your foot in the door earlier on so that you have a bit of a relationship.
Yep, you're exactly correct. And one thing that we've noticed too in our it's just amazing how it's evolved. And you talked about it too, David, how it's evolved over that time. How, when I started, it was really about stockbrokers, right? You're just kind of individual stocks. Now it's really changed. You had the great financial crisis
Right.
that made people really rethink their investments. And it's like, let's focus on the long term, on goals, investment objectives, and less on, you know, beating a benchmark. Let's focus on, I want to retire. What do I need to do? And that's one thing we've learned at Zephyr is that evolution of, it's really more of a greater holistic financial planning, determining your investment needs and objectives, than what it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And you got to understand that.
It's interesting. Some advisors still think their job is to beat the market when really their job is to help their client reach their goals. We talk about something called, are you a purpose-based investor or a performance-based investor? And there are some performance-based investors, a lot of do-it-yourselfers that just want to beat the market every year. They want to grow their net worth without paying any attention to what their family goals are. It's almost like it's a competition sport, right? They want to get more return so they can hold their balance sheet up to their neighbor's window and go, ha ha, I'm worth more than you are, sucker, and But let's face it, most people don't want to do that. Most people are more purpose-based. There's things they want to achieve in their life. And I find that even to start a meeting, early days, they taught us, they probably taught you too, how to build rapport, right? Build rapport with small talk. Well, to me, that's cheap salesman talk. People see right through that today. People are more sophisticated. The best way to build rapport is to talk to you about your goals, your vision for life, and what you want your money to do for you and your family. If we get into what's important to you before we get into the alphas and betas and all that, you have essentially the keys to the kingdom. You've got the heartstrings, and so even just in getting a new client, it makes a lot of sense to go that path, because most people are not performance-based; they're purpose-based.
Well, and another thing too with that, David, is it makes that relationship a lot stickier, right?
Yeah.
When you, like you talk about estate planning, or if you do a financial plan, if you're just performance-based investing, all of a sudden your performance slips, it's really easy to move to a different financial advisor or go and do it on your own. Whereas if you do have an estate planning, a very detailed financial plan for the family, it makes it a lot harder to change because that relationship is much stronger.
Yeah, what they say, you make one sale, you have a customer, you make 3 sales, you have a client. And so to me, yeah, if you can have, as an independent advisor, if you can have the financial plan, have the investments, maybe have somebody there who can help them with their tax return or tax planning, have somebody over there to help them with the estate plan. Now, as a firm, you've got that person. You've got that person loyal. And, the other thing, have you ever seen where, let's say, one person runs the money, let's say it's the husband, and then all of a sudden he passes on, and the advisor thinks, hey, of course I'm going to keep this business because the wife's still alive, but the business walks out the door. Have you seen that?
Yes, and that I'm really glad you brought that up, because during this Great Wealth Transfer, we talk a lot about just going to a younger generation. We don't talk about potentially the money not maybe going to the kids, but maybe going to the wife or the widow.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a bigger piece to the puzzle, and what is often forgotten, because women have a much different mindset to investing than a man does. You just talked about performance, kind of chasing performance, and FOMO. FOMO is very powerful right now. That tends to be more with men than women. And women, you talked about it, the investment philosophy for women is completely different. They tend to invest more in their morals, things that they believe in, which means that they tend to invest longer term. They also tend to invest in more investment objectives, their goals, thinking about money, leaving a legacy for their kids. Not saying men don't, but women tend to do that more, and their investment objectives are much different. And that is something financial advisors need to consider. Again, I talk about communication. You got to start communicating and bringing women back and the wives back into that discussion, sit them on the table, because they're going to control the majority of the assets during this Great Wealth Transfer. And you need to be able to connect with them, understand the way they invest is completely different than the men, and you need to be able to meet those demands.
I was fortunate. I had a family member early on in my career become a client of mine, and they had a decent amount of money. And the reason they became a client was because their current advisor ignored her and focused on him, and she was not having it. So she said, we're leaving, and that's how I got them as clients. So I always remember that, and it's interesting. One of the stories that I tell all the time is a client which I ended up taking on many years ago, where the husband was really knowledgeable. In fact, he had a master's degree in finance from a world-renowned economist. If I'd mentioned the economist's name, you'd know it. Everyone would. And he was running the meeting, and he kept saying, yeah, I get it. What else? I get it. What else? Move on. He's pulling me along, and I'm sticking to basic stuff. And finally, I had to look at him and say, all right, hotshot, calm down. There's 2 of you in the room right here. And I literally said it this way. There's 2 of you in the room right here, and I'm not just talking to you. I want to make sure you're both pacing with me. A little bit later, she went to the bathroom and he looked at me and he said, "Thank you." He goes, "I do that to her all the time. I shouldn't. I can't help myself. Thank you for doing that." And I said, "You're very welcome." Because to me, it was the right thing to do. And I don't care if he got ticked off and I lost him. I lost a guy who was a jerk. I don't want a jerk as a client anyway. Turned out he's a real nice guy and has been a great client now for more than a decade. So whenever I sit with financial advisors and I watch them in their meetings with new prospects, that's one thing. I picture myself when they start focusing on, especially focusing on the husband, maybe because he's more boisterous and the wife is quieter. I picture myself like one of those old, I don't know if you remember Ally McBeal, the sitcom, where she would have these whole cartoons that played out in her mind about something she would do to somebody, and then all of a sudden you wake up and she's still sitting there listening. So I get this whole cartoon of me reaching over and just slugging the advisor in the face, and like a prize fighter, his jaws going back and forth, and you see this saliva coming out of his mouth. And then I wake up and I'm still sitting there observing this meeting. I hadn't done anything, right? But that's the Ally McBeal moment I have when I'm watching advisors make this stupid mistake.
Yeah, and you bring up such a good point too, where so this story, my dad, he handled all the finances, everything, investments. My mom didn't know anything, and he passed away tragically 15 years ago. My mom was lost. And this is another way a financial advisor can really help with that transition. If, with a financial advisor, if they really know the client in the family, they might have a better idea of maybe where are the bank accounts, where's the mortgage at, is there insurance and stuff like that, where that financial advisor can be really that center of influence and play a major role. Make sure that money, that relationship is very sticky, and the wife, the widow, will really rely on that. And there you go, you got that relationship that's going to last for decades, and onto their kids. So when my dad passed away, my mom didn't know anything. They didn't have a financial advisor. I had to go home for 2 weeks and try and figure it all out. So there's other ways where a financial advisor can really do good things there and help a family out in times of need, and really build a great relationship there.
No, good point. It's it's interesting, but also for our listeners, from a sales perspective, if you're sitting in there with a prospective client, and let's say you've got this do-it-yourselfer, and he seems to know it all, right? You know the type, and maybe as opposed to listening to you, he just wants to brag about how well he's done, and you're wondering, why is this guy here? He's not wasting his time. Why is he here? Well, a lot of times I've gotten lots of clients by just acknowledging that, hey, he's doing a great job. He doesn't need me, but if he drops dead tomorrow, she's lost. And I'll actually ask him sometimes in front of his spouse, I'll say, is that why you're here? Because you kind of know you need a plan B, you need a backup plan. And when they say yes, now you have them. Now it's only a question of, which assets are you going to work with versus which assets is he going to keep during his lifetime, at least while he remains mentally sharp. So again, use that as a tool also to get new clients when you're having that meeting and you're just wondering, like, why is he here? Well, guess what? If he's married, that's probably why he's here, or it's why she's here, because it goes the other way, right? There's a lot of times women run the finance. I have lots of clients where the guys just sit there like this, twiddling their thumbs. They don't know. They couldn't tell you to the nearest $100,000 what their net worth is.
Yeah. And for some, you're exactly, they don't want to know, maybe, right? They don't want to, but you got to say, hey, this is important. You really do. And maybe they just want to focus on the investments. And that's another piece, David, too, that comes, we talk about personalization and clients, and it's not even like millennials now, even investors that are maybe in their 40s and 50s, they're demanding more personalization, more control, more transparency of their investments. A 60-40 portfolio that's cookie cutter just isn't going to cut it moving forward. You need to offer investments that can be personalized and meet their investment objectives. We often talk ESG. It's very polarizing. I like to talk more about sustainable investing. What do these investors, do they believe in? What do they want to invest in? What don't they want to invest in? And that's where we as Zephyr, we really like SMAs, separately managed accounts, because it gives the investor, the client,
Yeah.
flexibility on what they can invest in. Direct indexing too is very popular, and it addresses those needs of personalization, control, customization, which they want and need.
It's funny. It's I just met with someone recently who actually uses a psychological profile, like a disc type psychological profile with prospects, because he wants to know whether that prospect just wants the bottom line in the big picture, or that prospect is somebody who needs all the details, or that prospect is very maybe safety oriented. That was an interesting approach. I had a huge limiting belief when he told me this, and I said, well, people are really going to fill out this thing. You're essentially saying, let me into your head so I can sell you. And he said, yes, because most people do. And I've confirmed it since then with other advisors using it, that, yeah, it can work. So going back to your point at the beginning, find out how much level of specificity these people want. Is the big picture enough? Is it not? And of course, if you're dealing with a couple, well, then you have to cater to both. But at least if you know that, you got a better chance of keeping the assets in one spouse dies, and then hopefully keeping the assets beyond that.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. It's about communication, understanding, however you gather that data, like you say, whether it's a form or just, basic communicate, talking to them. But you're exactly right. You can provide a client with a 3-page report that maybe just has returns. Are you on your way to meeting your objectives? Or like you mentioned, you could get into the weeds and analysis, paralysis by analysis, and offer beta and omega and all these analytics if the person really wants to. But you better make sure you know who you're talking to, because you start throwing omega out there to somebody that doesn't care, you're going to lose them.
Yeah, and a lot of times advisors they use their own personality. So either the advisor's big picture and everything's big picture, or the advisor's very detailed and everything's detailed because that's their model. But a good salesperson, and let's face it, financial advisors are salespeople, because if you're the smartest advisor in the world but you can't convince people to take action, you haven't helped anyone, and you're also a very broke financial advisor, right? So you've got to be good at compelling people to take action, and people are good at that, know to get in the other person's world, okay? If I know 4 languages and I know your primary language is French, well, heck, I'm not going to speak Italian to you. I'm going to speak French. I'm going to come into your world so I can communicate. And again, another way to do that is when it comes to that level of detail. So,
and you bring up a good point too about working with people that are like you. I think that always helps, is having clients. Yes, maybe it narrows the lake or the ocean that you're fishing in terms of trying to find clients. But if you kind of have a niche market and you have clients, let's say that you love sports and that are very sports centered, or maybe you are, got a background in technology, so you focus on technology professionals, it makes those communication and that conversation with those clients much easier. You're going to enjoy it more, because you're talking about things you enjoy, and you're going to have clients that are a lot like you. So there's a chance when that money does pass on, those kids will probably stay with you because you have the same connection, and same, likes and dislikes.
and that's great for those that are marketing with a rifle, where they're taking dead aim, they're marketing for a certain type of person. Those that are marketing more shotgun, then they have to learn to become more versatile in their approach. They need to be able to get into the other person's world, and learn how to communicate better in the other person's language. So you're right; those are 2 ways to run a business, depending upon whether you want to market and prospect with a rifle or with a shotgun. So, any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with regarding, again, why or how that they should be taking advantage of this generational wealth transfer versus fearing it?
Yeah, and it's a topic that I feel as if we've been talking about a great wealth transfer for decades now.
Yeah.
And I think if you haven't started planning for it, and thought about it, you're probably a little late here because it's something that's coming on very quickly. And it's important to understand and communicate what the younger generation, or, and that could be, like you said, David, 40 or 50-year-olds, what that generation, what their demands are. What type of people are they? How do they like to invest? And how do they like to communicate? And also meeting those unique demands. Every client's different. I'm different than you, David. My requirements and demands are going to be completely different. And that can be very, polarizing or time consuming to meet those demands. So I think it's also important to leverage technology so you can make those workflows efficient and those processes efficient, because it is going to be time consuming to make sure everything is personalized with a personalized touch to each individual unique client. But when you do it and do it right and create those workflows leveraging technology, you can make that risk into an opportunity and really benefit from it, from keeping your own clients and the next generation, to also gathering new assets from others.
Well, and the good news right now is the baby boomers are between age 60 and 79, so they're getting close to life expectancy. So I would argue that if you haven't started looking at this glass half full yet, well, you still have some time left to do so. So Ryan, thanks again for being here. I really appreciate you being here on the show. Lots of good insight as usual. And where can people pick up your Adjusted for Risk podcast?
Yeah, first I would start, with our website, which is the zephyrfinancialsolutions.com website, and you can get a lot of different research, content, thought leadership there. Then also you can also get all of our episodes. The episode that you were on, David, of the Zephyr's Adjusted for Risk podcast there. So it's our Zephyr website. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Zephyr Financial Solutions on LinkedIn, and get all of our research there, and also find your episode there.
All right. Well, there it is. You heard it straight from Ryan Nuaman, expert in really lots of things, but today an expert in helping us look at that intergenerational transfer as being glass half full instead of glass half empty. Again, Ryan, thank you. And you've been listening to Ryan Nuaman and David Scranton, host of the Elevated Advisor podcast. And we hope that you're here with us next week, same time, same station.
You have been listening to the Elevated Advisor podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your colleagues. If you would like to talk about elevating your financial firm, reach out to us at theelevatedadvisorpodcast.com. Investment advisory services offered through Sound Income Strategies, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Sound Income Strategies, LLC, and the Retirement Income Source, LLC are associated entities.